Hi, do you want to know how you can keep Asian students happy when you're teaching online? Are you getting a few complaints from some of these ESL companies and you need to kind of really understand and know how you can make that better? If that's you, it's coming right up. Hi, it's Alison from DigiTeach. So today I thought I'd talk a little bit about how you keep Asian students happy, in particular Chinese students, because this is something that comes up time and time again. People ask me this quite a lot. It's one of the biggest moans, I think you could say, that a lot of online ESL teachers have. You see it everywhere on social media and Facebook groups. And the biggest crux of this is the ratings. So I thought this would be a really nice thing to talk about because it kind of affects a lot. It can affect your bookings, you know, whether you get rebooked, how many bookings you get, your rate of pay, everything. And basically it's all about keeping the clients happy, keeping the students happy. Now, if you don't know anything about me, you've never met me before, you've never come on my channel, or you're not in any of my Facebook groups, I'll explain briefly who I am. My name's Alison McRobbie. I am an online teacher. I teach perhaps a lot less now because I do a lot of training. I also have my own educational programs and curriculums. I teach all over the world. I train teachers all over the world for themselves so that they can become fully independent teachers, creating their own curriculums, their own resources. I've got this on because one thing I find when when the weather changes as well, if you think, why is she sitting there in the scarf, is to protect my voice, because I do a lot of recording, I do a lot of stuff online, as you guys probably do, and my voice often gets affected in the changes in England. It's really cold at the moment, so I've got this on just to make sure, you know, protect it as much as I can. And I am going to sip coffee all the way through because I am a coffee addict, so there you go. Okay. Right, so my experience as well comes from years and years and years of experiences. Obviously, I'm not 20. I've done this a lot. I've worked for ESL companies, and I've worked in schools all over the world, as well as in England. Now, the biggest thing with Asian students in particular is whether you're teaching children or adults. Obviously, I teach both. I have taught both. So let's go back to the tagging. Let's talk of the structure. First of all, when you're teaching English online through a company, an ESL company, specifically a Chinese or an Asian company, it is completely different to teaching an Asian student independently, or any other student actually online who isn't from Asia. And a lot of this is because of the culture of China and the ethos, so that's the way of thinking behind that particular company, and how they market themselves, how they brand themselves, and how they sell themselves, and ultimately how they sell the courses and the lessons to the parents or the clients. And by that I mean the expectations that they're projecting to the clients, to the people that are paying for the lessons, with be that the parent for the child or for adults themselves. So ultimately the clients have an expectation. Now that is general in any business in the world. That's a very general, you know, that's typical, you know, that's basic marketing. However, where Chinese ESL platforms are different is in the cultural aspect, which if you haven't worked with online ESL companies, or you've never been to Asia, or you've never worked with that type of student in their country, you know, it's a learning curve. And by that I mean in England, where I live on the south coast, for example, we have a huge amount of language schools, English language schools, and we have a huge amount of Chinese students that come to these language schools. Now, how they interact in the lessons here and what they expect here as a Chinese student learning English is totally different as if they're compared to the ones the same age, coming from the same area, you know, all the rest learning English on an ESL platform. So ultimately, context is very, very important. Now, when you're teaching children, you do have to be quite high energy, because obviously you're on a small screen. You're probably using a 420 resolution on your screen. So props, animation, all the rest of this, TPR is very important. Also, it's a fundamental of teaching online, especially children, articulating and overemphasizing your actions. In fact, I do it so much that when I'm speaking to people, I still do it. If I'm walking the dog, I remember the last time I was walking the dog along the beach with my son, and someone stopped and said, "Oh, can you tell us the directions to wherever?" I started using a lot of TPR, and when the person walked off, my son went, "Mum, like, you know, what's with the actions?" So it's just within me now, you know, it comes naturally now. I've done it for so long. So that's one thing with kids. The second thing is, obviously you need to gauge the level of English exposure to your student. Now, lots of platforms don't allow the students or give the students the option to not use a camera, to not turn their camera on. Personally and professionally, I hate that. I think it's useless. I think if you're going to take an English lesson, you need to see the teacher's mouth so that you can see how the mouth is shaped to make the sounds, to get the correct pronunciation. And actually, I think the teacher needs to see that as well. I think companies that don't do that are kind of doing a lot of their students a disservice. Ultimately, it's no loss to the teacher, because, you know, I can speak English, but if you want to learn English well, I need to see your mouth. And privately, I won't take any private clients if they don't want to show their face. It's as simple as that. You know, if you want to learn another way, then go ahead, but that's not how I teach. And if you want to learn English fast, the best way is so you can both see each other. Plus, when you're working online, it's a fully interactive process. And interacting is interacting. You need two people, two elements to interact, otherwise it ceases to be interactive. So that's very important. However, if you're working for an ESL platform and they don't have their camera on, or the children aren't using the camera, you are really going to have to switch on everything. You're going to have to really recognize the pauses. Can you hear another parent? Is there a parent echoing your words to the child? Is the child confused? What's the pause length? Are they responding? Are they umming and ahhing an awful lot? And you're going to have to pick up on all of those environmental things, because that is how you're going to assess the situation and then ultimately keep that client happy. So for example, if I was in a situation where I had a student, it was a child student, so a junior, and they were struggling, and I could hear a parent in the background, and a lot of teachers think that that's quite annoying if they can hear the parent echoing. Personally, I don't mind that. If the parent is echoing my words, then that's fine. But if they're answering every single question, like in a snapshot like that, as sometimes they do, before the student can answer, that's not very beneficial for the student. But again, that's a parent's choice. It isn't the best way to learn English. It's certainly not the fastest way for a child to learn English either, which is kind of what Asian parents want. They want their child to learn fast and well. You know, that's that. So if I'm in that situation, I would start to write everything down on the screen pretty much as I'm saying it. I would use short, focused sentences, and I would write them down clearly on the screen. okay? And I would use lots of okay, it's good, before I move on. Because even if the child hasn't understood and you can hear the parent will go, yes, yes, okay, okay. And, you know, they're basically saying they've got it. So they're going to go over that. And lots of parents take a real interest in their children's learning in China. It's not the same in England. They have a different approach. I'm not saying they're not interested, but their approach is very different. For example, in England, I've got 2 teenage children. When my oldest was doing his exams, he had private tuition online for a couple of subjects. I didn't sit there all the way through the lesson with him. You know, he's 16, you know, or 15, you know, I can watch a record or what have you if I want to after. And that's quite typical for that age. In China, it would be the opposite. They would be sitting there. And if you can't see the elbow of the parent in the camera lens or kind of sitting next to them or behind them, trust me, the majority of the time, they will be there. And don't think that, just don't think that the company are the only people recording. The parents have a copy of that recording after the lessons. It's quite often given to them. They can access it as part of their package and they will watch the lesson. And if they're unhappy with something, they will complain. They are very quick and very fast to complain. So quite simply, the minute you're on that camera, you need to think like it's the CEO of that company or whoever watching you. You almost have to think like your job depends on it, because actually it does when you're working for an ESL company. So I assess everything, I start to break it down, I write it all down. Now, lots of parents don't like the happy clappy singing type of thing, and they certainly don't like paying for a lesson and getting the child to draw lots. That seems to be a definite no-no. So I remember being once in a lesson where the activity actually said, draw a da 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 da, and the parent then made a complaint because the child was drawing, even though it was in the lesson plan that had been set by the company. So I did have to navigate kind of around that. However, generally they don't like drawing. In an English lesson, a little bit of illustration using an icon or a small image quickly to show what the word means or to make sense of what you're trying to teach them is something else. But saying, oh, let's just draw a picture of, you know, your house and a garden with all the flowers and the birds and the sky, and you sit there just and ahhing going, yes, sky, all the rest of it, is a no-no. Don't do that. Okay, so that's the second thing. The third thing is the reports. You have to I memorize stuff because I've been doing it a long time. I've got my own processes now. But if you need to quickly write things down very quickly as you're doing the lesson, then do that so you can write a good, comprehensive and concise report. Not little Johnny did very well in the lesson today, well done, your pronunciation improved, see you next lesson. That's very substandard. And parents don't like that. They like detailed. And they can, you know, it's all translated for them on the other end, so they do read it all. So that's briefly the children. Now, if you're teaching, that's teaching children in one-to-one. If you're teaching children in a group, that's completely different again. And quite often you will find children in a group, they're meant to be at the same level, but quite often they're not, especially at the weekend, because lots of the ESL platforms as part of the package say by the X such and such a package, your child gets 2 lessons a week or 4 lessons a week or 8 lessons a week, and they get a free lesson at the weekend or 2 free lessons at the weekend. So you will find sometimes that those lessons are a number of children grouped together, probably very different, not very different, but I've rarely found them to be the same level academically in English. And there is quite often, that's where the complaints can come, you know, it went too fast or went too slow or didn't understand or noise from the background. So if you're in a class and you've got another student who's got a baby crying, you know, the mum's got a baby crying or there's traffic, then mute the microphone. and explain that, oh, I can hear noise in your background. It's okay, but I need to turn off your microphone between the questions. Put it on the screen, leave it up on the screen a little bit, and at least the other parent who's watching with their child has recognized that you have noticed and you are trying to do something about it. Okay, you can still get complaints in that situation, but at least it's shown to the parent and also to the company that you have kind of tried to limit the risks. Okay, now let's move quickly on to adults. I could do a whole video actually about adults. Teaching Chinese adults is real, I think it's like playing poker actually, because especially if it's in a group. Now, lots of people, adults, are learning English for a number of different reasons when they get to adult age in China. You may find yourself in a group with adult learners, maybe a housewife, that's had no exposure or very little exposure to English. Maybe a student, maybe a doctor, maybe a teacher. Those are quite different learning elements and learning capabilities and learning skill sets to have within one group. And it can be very, very tricky to manage. And I have been before in lessons where I've done my lessons and I've had 10, 10, 10, 1. Now, the 1 is the type of score that will push your rating percentage right out of the window, and you're like, everyone else thought it was 10. How can this person like rate it as a 1? Quite often it would be because that person was the less able, or the student that had the kind of lowest ability in English in that group and struggled. So technically they shouldn't really have been with the other students, but you know, you can't control that. All you can do is control what you've got in front of you and do the best. So one tip is turn taking is absolutely key in all group lessons, especially with adults. Now, you quite often find a couple of students or 1 or 2 students that are very good and will try to correct other students before you can actually like get the words out. You need to stop that straight away. You can send them a message or something, or you can just mute their microphone every time they do it until they get the message. That is quite a common element. Stop that, nip that in the bud straight away, because that's a little bit demoralizing. It's certainly not polite, and it's certainly not the student's place to correct another student when they're both in a learning English group. However, this does happen, so stop that. The second thing is to watch the percentages of time of who is speaking the most. And if you have a student who is not speaking much, if you're asking like a couple of group questions and you've got a student that isn't speaking much, don't let that silence dissuade you from thinking they've got it or you don't have to, because quite often that student is maybe not understanding, and then later on they will make a complaint. So if they're not speaking much, I would mute other microphones, and then I would say to them, oh, Juan, did you understand? Is everything okay? And then I would direct a specific question just at that student. One, so they know they're getting value for money, they're getting treated just like everyone else. You're giving them just a little bit of a focus just for a moment. And you're also checking, you know, where they're up to, what they're struggling with as well, so that you can assess and go back, as I said, with the children at the beginning of this. So that's really, really important as well. Quite a lot of adults have a sociability factor as well in the lessons. So I might spend anything from kind of 40 to 50 seconds to 1 to 2, maybe sometimes 3 minutes at the beginning of the lesson with a couple of pleasantries. There are 2 reasons I do that. One is so I can start to gauge straight away what their levels of English are by asking them questions and seeing their response, I'm able to gauge their kind of capabilities, their skill set. So I'm starting to frame my lesson then. I'm starting to plan it because I know what the lesson plan is. So then I'm starting to see, right, I'm going to direct that to that student, that I'm going to work a bit more with them on that. You know, I kind of break it all down within my mind and the lesson at that point, and then I drill further down into it in the lesson. And the second reason is because quite often you need to allow for maybe a couple of students entering the online classroom a little bit later, because that, you know, they might have, you know, had a connection problem, or they haven't got their mic on or something like that, or there was some kind of delay of some sort, that's, you know, a technical delay or something. So you know, but after 3 minutes, I'm on, that's it, we're on the next page. So if someone comes in 5 or 10 minutes late and then kind of starts being a bit demanding, I will say like they want the whole lesson to stop and us to go back and explain. And yes, it does happen. I will very politely say, hi Wan, I'm just going to do this famous one. Hi Wan, thanks very much for that question. This is a lesson about such and such, but you were 10 minutes late, so I do need to continue so that we can complete all the slides in the allocated time. If we've got time at the end, you can ask me questions. Thank you. And then I move on. Okay, obviously I say it a lot slower than that, but that's how I deal with it. And all of the time it's about dealing with what comes up and making sure that you've covered yourself with the company, but you're also keeping the customer happy. Don't think you can cover yourself, your back with the company, and they will kind of take your side against the customer. Never in the many years I've been working with Asia has that ever happened. The customer is always right for them. So you have to keep them happy, and that don't get into the situation, the confrontational situation of, I see all this stuff about screenshot and screen recording and this and that. I mean, you shouldn't be really screen recording anyway. I'm not too sure that's a good idea for many reasons, unless it's for a training purpose, for example. But once you've got to the situation where you're starting to challenge the authority of the ESL platform by trying to prove something unless you've been asked for it, they will see that as confrontational, they will see that as challenging, and they don't like it. Okay, so don't think that you can deal with a situation as you would do in an English or in a British or an American or wherever country you come from way, because the Chinese way of dealing with stuff is very different. It's, you know, it's very, those are the rules, those are the laws. You either get on with it and work with it, or you do something else, you know. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Okay, so that's how I keep the adults happy. I also kind of, I try and break it up a little bit more with the adults, unless I've got someone that's clearly super serious. Then I do pop in a few jokes. That's my way. When I'm teaching independently, I teach like hundreds of people in online classes privately myself, and I'm quite jokey. I have a few jokes. I've got my style, and they love it, you know, and that's people from all over the world. I have to be very careful if I'm teaching in a small group to Asian adult students. I can't use that same manner, that same technique. So I'm very much more formalized. I think that's the thing you need to do, whether you're new to online teaching or whether you've been doing it a while and you're having issues with complaints and ratings and that type of thing. You need to formalize your teaching for Asian students, and it is unique, I think, really. I've never encompassed the things I kind of have to do with Asian students. I don't really have to do anywhere else. They're very specific. I'm not saying other students aren't specific, but with ESL platforms, if you do something slightly wrong, even by default, like not getting a rating is a complaint. Actually, I don't know if you know that, but I mean years ago I had an email like, you had like 24 complaints in 1 month, and I was like, what? No way. But what they mean is 24 people who did not leave a rating. Now not because they thought you were bad. These people are taking lessons. Some of them are taking lessons every single day. They don't want to sit there and do the thing, or it pops up on the screen after the lesson. A lot of them don't want to do it. They can't be bothered to do it. They might be going off and doing something else, and they might think, well, I've already said the same thing as like yesterday. So there's all that element to it. However, the company's kind of I don't want to say don't get it, but you know, that's you have to get the rating. You have to, I mean, I won't say any rating is better than a no rating. I'm not going to say that, because if you've got no rating and you get a 1, then neither of those are very good. But at the end of my lesson, I might spend 2 minutes very nicely encouraging them to leave a rating. Now I'm going to do another video about that, because you have to be very specific about how you do that, and make sure that you are not asking them to like favor you or anything like that. But I frame the situation, I create a nice situation, I briefly discuss you know, their weak points and strong points if it's a one-to-one lesson at the end, and I would say, I'm going to follow all of that up for you in a report, blah blah blah. Would you like to do the same for me? That type of thing. I could do another video on that. If it's a group lesson, I will briefly talk about what we did in the lesson at the end, the conclusion, and I will ask, I always like to leave a minute or 2 to see if they've got any questions, and make sure one person doesn't monopolize that whole time, because you know, you might get a tag after saying did not have the opportunity to speak, and it might mean something like that. So you have to be really on it, basically. So in a nutshell, that's a brief introduction into how you can keep Chinese and Asian students in particular happy when you're teaching them online through an ESL platform. I hope that helps, and as always, everybody, keep it digital, keep it real. See you next time. Bye. I'm going to drink my coffee now. I forgot about it actually. I think it's going to go cold. Anyway, goodbye. See you next time.